Welcome everybody once again to another webinar within the Trading Psychology Masterclass brought to you by Jare and Traderline. We're super excited to have you guys here on this Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us live. If you're here and if you're watching the recording, welcome as well. We've got a lot in store for you today, a lot of things to be reviewed from your homework that Jared is going to provide some basically feedback live right here for you. So really looking forward to that. Just a few housekeeping things as usual. This is being recorded, so feel free to take a break if you need it, step away, get some food, and you'll be able to rewatch and rewatch the entire thing as many times as you wish. Additionally, please leave any comments in the chat box and any questions in the Q&A section. That just kind of keeps things organized and easy to access for us. And we're not going to be doing the threads this time because they didn't seem to be super useful. So feel free to just drop any questions you have in the Q&A section natively. Additionally, we'll be taking 2 shorter breaks this time just to basically break things up a little bit better. And with that, I think that pretty much covers that housekeeping, all those housekeeping tasks. So Jared, it's all yours. Take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Great to see everybody here again. Working hard. Really impressed with the material that's coming back. There's clear progression. I think we're all kind of moving, I wouldn't say in lockstep. Some are a little bit farther along than others in the material that's getting sent back, which is great. And, I'm going to spend a bulk of the time today reviewing your maps, your real-time strategies, and your mental hand histories. That's going to be a lot of what you're going to do. But if you're kind of in the group that is not sending material back, I want to just remind you, this is not for me. It is for you. Right. And osmosis and just trying to absorb the material from listening to it is only going to get you so far. I'm sure there can be new insights you generate and new perspectives that you gain. But at the end of the day, if you're going to truly transform your state of mind, your emotional reactions, and your ability to actually solve the costly problems that have kind of driven you here, you've got to do the work. And there's no other way around it. So you don't have to send it back to me, but just make sure that you're doing it on your own. And for some of you that are struggling a little bit, I just want to kind of call out, make sure you're asking me direct questions in terms of what you're looking for. There's oftentimes times, and I'm not saying within this masterclass where this has occurred, but sometimes I'll get, feedback or, a problem is kind of posed to me and it's, there actually isn't a question attached to it. It's somebody's just kind of trying to dump a problem in my direction and I guess trying to make me figure it out what it is that they even want. So my point in saying that, for any of you that are struggling, really try to formulate very specific questions that you want answered, or very specific problem statements that you're struggling with and how that problem fits into context. And then, either post it in the chat today, post it in the Q&A today, and I'll get to it, or you can send it as part of your homework before the next webinar series in 2 weeks. All right. So let's get to it. And this shouldn't be a surprise. Let's do another quiz to see how much you learned from the previous section. The previous session. So I can see the link is there to SurveyMonkey. So click the link. There are 5 questions. You've got 90 seconds to answer them. And then we'll take a look and see how you all did. Let's see, we're up to 57. Right on the average, 50%. 2.5. Okay, so let's see. Looks like we got one person got 4.6. How is there 4.6? I don't even know how these are graded like that. We'll see where we land. Mm-hmm. All right, we got 60. All right, so we're still at the average. All right, so let's just go through these quickly. All right, which of the following is a key attribute of an ideal mentality for working on your mental game? Being very detail-oriented. Sure. I mean, I'm not going to say that's not, but the one that I called out was being willing to get out of your comfort zone. That is a common trait of the people that have been most successful in my program. Having very high standards, that's nice. But if those high standards turn into expectations, then they're going to cause problems. What is not an example of managing a problem? All right, this is one of the trickier ones. Okay, so asking why you're moving a stop to break even is the correct answer. And it's the correct answer because you are kind of digging into the problem a bit more. You're trying to ask why that's even happening. Exercising overly strict risk limits or turning off your monitors, right? Those are examples of ways that traders often are managing a problem. Why is the mental hand history important? Okay, we've got a good number of answers here. Helps you to identify the real cause of your problems. Number one, gives you a record of your past mental game problems. That was the trickiest one, right? Mental hand history, I was kind of playing on those words. No, I mean, it's not a past record of problems. It's, again, try to break down and analyze the cause of it. Makes it easy to organize your mental game work. In the history of psychology, it's the only tool that helps you understand your mind. I mean, that's a bit arrogant if I were to say that were true. All right, steps to correcting your problem. This was another tricky one. Listen, I understand too. I mean, there's a lot of steps in my system. So no, map your pattern, get to the root of your problem, correct your problem, repeat and adapt are the 4 steps to my system. But the 4 steps to correcting your problem, like kind of what you're doing in real time, right, is that recognition, the disruption of that pattern, then you're injecting logic, and then you're using a strategic reminder. Looks like nobody fell for the go for a run, pour a stiff drink, watch Netflix, and pass out on the couch. All right, last one. Scenario, you've completed a mental hand history and feel confident that you understand the cause of your FOMO, but injecting logic isn't working. What is a possible cause? Again, a little bit of tricky here. The answer is all of the above, both 2 and 3. So yeah, you didn't get to the root of what's causing FOMO could be the reason as well. All right, so 50%, a little bit of work to do here, folks, but that's why we test it, just to make sure. And I look at it again, I get it. There's a lot of material that's being thrown at you. So if I think that if the average was north of 80%, I would have been ecstatic. All right, so let me just look at some of these comments here. Ron saying, not sure on number 2, seems like overly strict limits is not a way of managing a problem. What am I missing here? So yeah, there are scenarios where having overly strict limits is correct. I'm not saying that in all scenarios that is not like something that you should have as part of your risk management. I am saying that there are times that traders are doing that out of fear, right? That they're sort of squeezing their profitability by having stops that are too tight. And then of course they can't actually let their system run. That Ali mentioned, it's interesting and feels like I start seeing a bit of progress and then something new, right? New pattern, new emotional residual emotion shows up. And that's super common, right? I mean, I think as you begin to kind of really peel back the layers and understand more of the dynamics of what's going on through your mind and your emotional reactions, right? You are just going to kind of gather more information, and it can be overwhelming at times. Don't let that feeling derail your progress at all. All right. So let's get into what we're going to do today. So with regards to the maps, I'm actually not going to review some specific maps that you've done before, right? And the examples that came back to me showed clear progress. They, to me, show that there's kind of clear iterations that are continuing. But I am certain, that some of you are continuing to struggle. But again, I think if you have specific questions about how to map your pattern of anger or fear or greed or confidence or discipline, post them in the Q&A and I will get to them. All right. But my general comment here is well done, right? This task can be hard, right? As you continue to find new details, right? Again, think of it as something that you're going to continue to iterate on if new stuff continues to pop up. But for some of you, you will get to a point where those new details stop, right? As far as like dramatically new ones, maybe there's just sort of small details about a specific thought, right? But the nature of that thought still fits within your map. Okay. So I will say, well, one thing that came back to me as well, this is from one of your fellow students here who said that these tools are difficult, but if they were easy, there'd be no value. And I do believe that that is the case, right? That because it is hard, it is forcing you to have an entirely new perspective on solving your mental game. Because the antidote, the alternative in my mind is we just come up with a lot of good things that sound nice, right? And they either stick or they don't, but you're kind of gambling, hoping you kind of find the right piece of logic that's going to line up with what you're actually struggling with, versus continuing to dig, right? Using your map as your point of entry where you start to dig. But again, overall, you guys are doing really well here. I was asking, is there a top three to five issues that we're running into? I will get into that as far as the mental hand histories and the real-time strategy combined with your map. But again, as far as the map goes, I think the only issues that are continuing to occur are just struggles identifying the actual data. And I will say that one of the things that oftentimes can be the thing you've got to look out for most, and I did mention this in the first webinar, I'll mention it again, your attempts to actually kind of manage your emotional reactions, your attempts to kind of suppress your emotions, right? They can be the points at which you are actually using as like an opportunity to kind of start peeling back the layers to your map, to the reactions that you're having. If you're suppressing all that stuff, you can't get to it. But if you recognize that you're suppressing it, well, then that becomes your trigger, right, in your mind to start digging and start to take a step back and say, all right, well, what would happen if I were to pull back on my risk limits and just let this thing run, to its normal, to the stop that it should be, and to see how that feels, and then actually experience it and then write it down, right? If you are not getting good data, you might be blocking out too much of it, trying to manage your emotions in too much detail. Javier saying, I find it hard to manage all the output from my brain. I still don't see a certain pattern. That's fine. Just keep getting it out, right? And you will eventually start to put pieces together if you continue to review it. So get it out, look at it, play with it, and then see what shows up. Kind of in real time the next day, the next several days. But the pieces will come over. And yes, I will go over the strategic reminder. Okay, so primarily what we're going to do today is spend a lot of time reviewing your mental hand histories and the maps plus your real-time strategy. In fact, my goal is to go to about 80 minutes of that. We're already kind of moving a little bit slower than I'd prefer, but there's a lot of good stuff here. So I wanted to spend the bulk of the time doing that today. And I know Richard mentioned already the break. I'll take a break kind of in the middle of that as we get into it. I will also say that we're going to try to aim for close to 2 hours today in total. I know the last couple sessions have run over by at least 45 minutes. We basically have gotten 3 webinars for the price of 2. And I just don't want to keep pouring on more and more material. I want you guys to help be able to consolidate it and get things a lot tighter now that all the pieces are here. They just need to be fit together for you in the right way. We're also going to talk about extreme accumulated emotion and how to deal with that, because it's kind of an X factor in what's going to compromise your ability to actually develop a strategy that's going to work for you. And then lastly, I'm going to introduce a theory that will help to ensure continued progress. And it's important to talk about that now, because for some of you, you're already starting to see it. And if you have the wrong impression of what feedback or what progress looks like, you're going to give yourself false feedback, and that could actually slow up or even derail the progress that you're making. All right, so I'm going to get started reviewing your materials. And Michael kind of alluded to this a second ago with this question about the strategic reminder. This is what I saw from a lot of you, just a big old blank section here. And so, yeah, this was one of the big things that was missing. And in fact, majority of them, this is the case. So I do realize that I did not give an example. And, that's on me. I think time frame wise, it's just something that got missed. And so here is an example from Richard to give you a clear idea of what it is that we're looking for here. Okay. So focus only on highest potential setups that fit your criteria. Don't sacrifice quality and place a trade simply to be active in the market. Trade with the trend in your corresponding time frame. Don't try to be early. Enter at the optimal point where you can easily, or where you can manage risk tightly and logically. You can read the rest of them. The point is, right, that we're looking more for the technical aspects of your system that will tend to disappear when you're emotional, right? So the indicators that might either disappear entirely that you normally would use, or you start to think about them in the wrong way, the actual mistakes that you tend to make, changes in your perception or changes in your decision-making. You could also write down kind of what your decision-making looks like when it's ideal. Okay, but this is an important part of the system, right? Just as we went over in the quiz a second ago, the steps to correcting your problem in real time involve that strategic reminder, because just because you've stabilized your emotions, right? So recognizing the reaction, the pattern has been triggered, right? Disrupting the momentum of that, and then injecting logic, right? That is your attempts to stabilize the emotional reaction that's occurred, or get yourself in a better frame of mind so that you can be trading better. But that does not automatically mean that you will, right? And so the strategic reminder here is designed to help you to do that fast, right? To be able to make that kind of pivot and recover and make the mental side of this like kind of a non-factor, right? That's ultimate, or the emotional side. We want these steps to be in the background, not, kind of ever present, right? Remember that pie chart, right, where segments of your mental and emotional system or your mind is now being devoted towards managing your emotions, right? We don't want that to occur. So the first 3 steps are to try to remove it. And then the 4th step of injecting logic, or of that strategic reminder, is designed to try to get you focused technically as quickly as possible so you can recover that ideal way of thinking. All right. So I would strongly encourage all of you to work on this over the next few weeks and send in your updated versions, right, of the entire map, including this. And I will say that many of you actually have a lot of this stuff written down, kind of in your injecting logic statements, even sometimes in your mental hand histories. So it's not like it's not there. It's just about organizing it in a way that just makes it a little bit tighter. Okay, so let's get to our first example here. And let's, so first thing to keep in mind here, you can see that the scale is from 1 to 5. But I think when you kind of think about it, really almost kind of double that scale, because it is kind of a 1 to 10 scenario. Because for me, right, if we get to, level 8, which is written as level 4, right, you can see my mind has lost control. Let me pull up this laser pointer here. So my mind has lost control, right? So if you've lost control, I mean, then you know that you are clearly kind of on the downside of that performance stress curve that your thoughts and law, where emotions have significantly compromised things. So in my mind, like, I think this is a great example, right? Bottom sections completed very well. The map shows a clear sense of progression. The methods of disruption show that as well. And then in the injecting logic statements, I can attest that all of these came from the mental hand history. Okay? And this was a point of confusion for many of you who kind of didn't feel like there was a clear connection between this and the mental hand history. Okay. And so that is how it fits together. When you're working through the mental hand history and you get to that step 4, where you're coming up with a correction to the faulty logic, right? This is what you apply here, right? This is the injecting logic is going to come from that. Now, sometimes clients of mine will want to use things that are written in steps 2, 3, and 4. Doesn't have to just be the correction, but the bottom line is you want to be including, right, that correction, because that's ultimately what is showing up in the moment. So if we look at one of these, okay, let's look at level 2 here. The first alarms on my focus list go off. Maybe it's still too early. The first 15 minutes are so tricky. Okay, so then they disrupt that momentum. Close your eyes and box breathe 4 times, then focus on key tickers only. Okay, so recognize the pattern, disrupted it, and now the injecting logic is there's plenty of opportunities. It's impossible not to miss something. Stay calm, concentrated, and focused. Right, and so that logic is trying to beat back and trying to fight against the reaction. And if it's done well, right, if the logic is getting at the root of it, there ought to be some material change, right, in your state of mind at that point, right? If the emotions get bigger, right, the ability for you to kind of chop into that emotional reaction starts to diminish, right, and gets harder and harder over time. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I think for sake of time, I think this is, again, good example here. That's why I'm calling it out. Let's just keep going here. Get rid of the laser pointer. All right, there we go. So this next one, there's 3 levels of anger that have been differentiated with a little bit of color coding. Very clear progression, very clear methods of disruption, very clear points of injecting logic. And the reason I kind of showed this one also is that I liked the multimedia, the little visuals that are here too. Again, sometimes when your mind is compromised, relying on just your ability to read is not always the best thing either. Sometimes you need something that's more aggressive, especially if anger is as intense or any emotion is as intense as that. Sometimes you need something that's a bit more dramatic. So you could have like a video recording of yourself kind of on your desktop, ready to pop open whenever that comes up, or whenever you reach that level. Or it could be a link to YouTube and a video that is designed to try to, again, really disrupt this. You get to level, 8, 9, or 10. The injecting logic is not necessarily designed to help you restabilized immediately so you could get back to trading really well. If you're at that level, you need almost more of the disruption to stop doing something dumb. Okay. And so just to get you actually away, so in this case, just turn off the PC and do a mental hand history. That's a fantastic way of doing it. The question is are you going to? Because it's so easy when the emotions are big and this strategy is still new, right? This is not automatic yet, right? We want it eventually to be that way. But right now, what is automatic is the things you're already good at, which is getting angry and making some mistakes. Okay. But to add that disruption, I would consider those visuals to be just that, to try to wake you up and to take action. And then, right, you can start working through the emotional reaction to better understand it. And the injecting logic can have a chance to start working. All right. Let's see here. Okay. We're going to keep going. All right. So I'm just going to give Brianna a heads up because after I speak to this, I'm going to have you come on live so we can kind of chat through your stuff. All right. So this comes from Sean, and I believe Sean's on right now, all the way from New Zealand, if I'm correct. All right. So this is Sean's, his map plus the real-time strategy. What I would say first and foremost is very interesting progression. If you look down the left side, where you've got the optimal state written first, right? This is under the phrasing of confidence, but you can see, right, there's greed at levels 1 and 2, then it turns into fear at levels 3 and 4, and then anger at level 5. And then what he's defined as discipline at 6 and 7. It's not discipline. That's confidence, right? So, again, discipline issues at that level are not going to come as a progression, as an intensity of emotions like this rising. It's going to come from something else. And I see Sean's here. That's awesome. So that's number one. So it's very cool. I mean, again, I think what this is beginning to see is how the kind of intricate ways in which emotions can overlap for themselves, right? And in the book, I think the way I've presented things generally has been, that traders have one specific issue, right? We're mapping anger, we're mapping fear, we're mapping greed. And as I said, right, you don't necessarily have all of them, A. B, when you do have some of them, sometimes there is a lot of overlap. And, kind of Sean has found that pattern for himself here. And I think for those that are still struggling with the mapping, and, Javier is describing, right, some of the added pieces that are not necessarily fitting together, maybe this is one way that will start to help to understand, right, that sometimes greed can be the beginning of problems, and then fear pops up, and then anger pops up as mistakes continue to be made, and then confidence becomes problematic as the results of those things are all bad, and then it makes you kind of question your competency. So the progression from an emotional standpoint can have this kind of complexity, and it's very clearly articulated here. Strategic reminder, I think, is where you need some work, because the strategic reminder really has more of a general reminders. They're almost versions of kind of injecting logic that don't get specific enough around just your trading strategy that need to be there. Now, I'm just going to mention that Sean said to me, right, that it's much easier to see the pieces and how they fit together. Really enjoyed the process of using the tools to go deeper and to understand more about how I tick. Seeing what triggers me, why, and how it escalates into tilt was profound. FYI, these are still a work in progress, as it is for many of you. All right, so let me just see if there's anything else I want to mention here. Okay. So when we get to the injecting logic statements down this, I think they seem logical, but I would question whether they get deep enough to achieve that end goal of resolution, right, where you actually are resolving those issues. I'm certain that these will help to better contain your emotions, but I think there's a bit more to do here. Right? And having read the 4 of the mental hand histories that you sent to me, right, they are generally good as well, but there's a lack of connection between those mental hand histories and what is written in those injecting logic statements. All right. So let's actually look at one of those mental hand histories. Okay. And so here's the first one. Oops, sorry. When I take a loss, it can lead to frustration and anger, usually at myself for making a mistake. And I should say that this is written at level 5. Okay, so level 5 is where the connection is attempting to be made, but the injecting logic statement does not go there. So when I take a loss, it can lead to frustration and anger, usually at myself for making a mistake. This can lead to an urge to get it back, which can lead to forcing trades to get what I want quickly. A loss means that I'm not making the progress as quickly as I want, and it feels personal and a reflection on me. So getting the loss back quickly is important to keep moving forward and my self-confidence. Why is that logic flawed? Your expectations are unrealistic within the reality of trading and yourself. You are not perfect, and you're taking the loss far too personally. Okay, so this is good. Okay, there's a clear sense, right, of understanding about what's happening, right? And the things that I've kind of called out here are ones that I don't know that are fully reflected, right, in the corrections down here. So remember, your edge has loss built into it, so relax and just trust it to lead you to success. Progress comes as you work the process, follow your edge, and trust all its aspects. You are independent of the market, and it can tell, and it can't tell your worth. All things that are not inaccurate. The question is, are they deep enough? Okay, and so I posed this question to Sean ahead of time and reframed the original problem. My expectations of myself are unrealistic. I expect perfection, and when results don't go my way, I take losses far too personally. Okay, so you can just see that these are things that are reflected in here. And for a lot of you who may have difficulty like kind of getting deep enough, one of the cues you can use to understand another place to kind of dig is to look at some reframing around what you're not, right? You are not perfect. You wouldn't say that, right, unless there was a part of you that believed you were perfect. Now, it could be just a very small piece kind of in the back of your mind, right? But it is relevant enough to call out because it's part of the roots of this issue, okay? So I expect perfection. And so this was my question for Sean, just to make it a little bit clearer. Like, why does it make sense that you expect perfection? Why does it make sense that you take losses personally? And here's what he said. Perfection means I won't fail because I've removed all the risk of failing. Failure, i.e. a loss, means I personally was not perfect and therefore not good enough and didn't meet the grade, which reflects my personal value. Only when I perform flawlessly am I valuable. So if I don't perform flawlessly, then it makes sense to punish myself because that is what I deserve. I mean, that is raw. That is real. Okay. So for some of you, it may feel difficult to kind of get over that threshold and be as honest as that. But you can see that once you get there, right, this is not you accepting that this is how you are going to think and feel for the rest of your life or the rest of your time as a trader. This is you just understanding what is actually going on in the back of your mind, because this is what is influencing all the things that we're seeing here and everything that we're seeing here, right? Getting at the heart of this is where the transformation happens. It's where you will be able to fundamentally upgrade your mentality, your reactions, and this stuff can start to go away. That's what we're after. Okay. So why is that logic flawed? It's humanly impossible to be perfect. So expecting this of myself sets me up for the very failure that I'm trying to avoid. I'll point it. I didn't say this. This came out of his brain. Okay. All of you are capable of this kind of insight. Okay. I promise you that. You may not always feel like it. Okay. Many a time have I felt like a dumbass. Okay. This stuff can be hard, but you just keep at it and you can get there. Now, we start looking at step 4 here. If I am kind and gracious on myself and allow myself the room to make mistakes, I will grow and succeed at trading. I would suggest that maybe we can get a bit deeper, or not necessarily deeper, but like clearer here. I'm not saying that what you said is wrong. I am saying that really you're trying to like kind of nail down like what's here in step 3. You know, it needs to be in here as well, right? So if you can't be perfect, then what can you expect of yourself, right? I can expect myself to try hard. I can set very high aspirations for myself, but those aspirations include a lot of learning. Okay? And that learning is necessary for me to be able to grow and succeed. So again, it's just kind of adding a few of the elements there. All right. Let me just see if there's any questions here. All right. So you're basically doing a 5 why on the problem outlined and then coming up with a solution that will correct the last why. Yeah. I mean, that's one way of thinking about it. Yeah. I mean, you're basically, I mean, like, it can drive you crazy just to keep asking why until you get right kind of so deep that you're not even sure where you are. That's going too deep, and it's not going to be practical, right? The heuristic that I'm actually going to, I guess, spoiler alert, mention later is that if you try, right, we go back to the injecting logic statements here. You try any of these injecting logic statements, and after 2 weeks they're not working. Okay, that is your cue to know that you don't know enough yet, right? Because after 2 weeks of kind of full-time activity, you should be making some progress. And if you're not, it just means that there's more to the puzzle to understand, and you need to go deeper. And so what you need to do is revise your mental hand history, kind of based on what's here. All right, Brianna, if you're ready, I'd love to bring you on.
And Brianne, you should be able to talk, and I just see you unmuted yourself. So how's it going?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, I'm just going to kind of show for context that you have done all of these maps. So here's the greed, the fear, the discipline, and the confidence one. And so clearly there's some advancement in the detail. And what you said to me in setting up your homework back was that you realized that the last ones from the last go around you did wrong.
Right.
This one feels a lot more cohesive, and I should get to this one, which is the one that you felt was more cohesive, but probably need to do a separate one for fear and confidence. This one kind of mashes everything together, but it has been incredibly helpful to me. The strategy has helped me to see where I start to go off the rails, and although I'm definitely not where I want to be, I have hope that I can get there. So first off, you can see just from the example I used with Sean, it's completely fine to have them be mashed together. It really comes down to what is most practical kind of for you in real time. That's kind of your metric for whether or not it's doing its job. But my question for you, because you've kind of gotten on the other side of this, was maybe for everybody else, in your mind, what was wrong about the first ones, and how did you actually get to this stage?
Well, the first ones, I was one of those people that thought I had to fill one out for all 5.
Okay.
And I know that my issues probably are concentrated in fear and confidence, but the confidence is very confusing to me because I literally will vacillate between overconfidence and underconfidence, like within minutes, and it flip-flops back and forth. So I can't make it have this nice linear scale between 1 and 10, but this kind of like the despair really, I really resonated with me, but I don't know that it's despair. I feel all these different things, but this 1 through 10, I feel like is linear.
And
So
does that
see where it starts.
Does that fit with what your experience is? So if you feel the flip flop, do you feel like you've got enough of it captured in this that is going to give you the feedback you need in real time?
Not really, because I've already added like a 3.5, and then I have another one I need to squeeze in here somewhere. So I don't know if I do separate maps, or I don't know if I need to tease one out for confidence by itself, or if I just maybe need to do like a 1 through 15.
Yeah, so I think in the last webinar I showed the 1 to 20, right, where 10 was the ideal confidence, and maybe that is the way to go. I mean, I think if you're kind of oscillating between over and under, lacking confidence and overconfidence that quickly, which is not uncommon, by the way, that quickly, then I think you still want to have a sense of this level of severity that's attached, a level of intensity of the emotion that's attached to each one of those. And so, maybe you're jumping from, let's say, level 8 in terms of underconfidence to level 12, and that, because it's just about giving you that feedback. If it is just on the confidence scale, then you ought to be able to do that. If it then starts to add some complexity where, kind of fear can start to pop in, what I would say is probably just like kind of keep it to confidence, right? You can have details that are fear-based still within confidence, right? If I were to describe, fear is going to kind of most often kind of show up around a lack of confidence, whereas greed and anger, are going to most often show up around overconfidence. So if there are those kind of emotions popping up around it, I would keep confidence as being kind of the central organizer, and then maybe add like kind of side points around, with fear and anger, if anger does show up at all, or greed.
Greed definitely shows up.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's probably just another way that you're describing the overconfidence.
Right. Okay.
Right. So this was your combination, which again I think is very well done. And so I think the question I have is really around the injecting logics, and I think from my sense there wasn't as much of a connection between the mental hand history and those statements. What is your sense?
Well, for me, the injecting logic statements, I feel like are pretty much the same thing that we all tell ourselves over and over again. I think I mentioned, I don't know how much power they actually have. So could probably use some help here.
Yeah. And that's, so you're right. So I think anytime that you, and I say this for everybody listening, right? Anytime that you are writing down things that you already know very well, you have to ask yourself the question, is this something that I just need to train better, right? It actually just needs to get sharpened, right? That axe for the injecting logic just has to get sharper so that in my mind, it's stronger. And then I can use it as a weapon in the moment to kind of cut through it. Or is it actually just not cutting through the right issue because it's not really relevant? It's sort of incompatible. It's like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. And I would imagine that it's probably more the latter for you, that these are things that sound nice in theory, but aren't necessarily as surgically connected, right? As detail connected to what you're experiencing at those times.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Actually.
Great. So let's look at mental hand history. So let's look at this one, and I've got a blank one that I'll pull over in a second. But the description of the problem that you described was jumping into a trade after missing the move due to a bad signal bar. Why does it make logical sense? I feel like the trade would work and thought about taking it, but didn't because it wasn't in my plan. I jumped in because I didn't want to wait forever for another setup that might not even have a proper signal bar. I thought the trade could still make money. Okay, what's the flaw? My plan is set up to not take trades like this because the probability doesn't work out in the long run. I have to be consistent in the trades I take for that probability to work in my favor. And so I think the issue that you're experiencing here in terms of why it's maybe not getting as deep from a mental and emotional standpoint is that there is this sort of shift to focusing a bit more on the technical kind of side of this, the sort of trading side of it, not necessarily the mental and emotional one. And I would say that is a very, very common one. I'll give everybody else some examples of these kind of later on. But what we have to kind of do is we're looking at this. By all means, yes, there can be a very specific kind of technical or trading oriented issue here. But to get to the root of the emotional stuff, we've got to think more from that frame of mind. So let's do that now. So this is the problem as I've kind of described it. Okay, taking some of the language that you've used.
Right.
After missing a move, I jumped into another trade because I don't want to wait forever for another setup that might not even have a proper signal bar. So if we just think more on the emotional side of things, what do you think makes logical sense why that's occurring?
For me, I feel like I've been in this practice mode for so long and I'm just ready to go. And I'm also slightly impulsive, which is why I'm a scalper. But I want to make money now is the issue. And I want to know that I'm accomplished the goal. I don't want to have to wait for another trade to set up to see if I'm successful in that trade. I want the answer right now.
So, I mean, just how does that feel to actually talk out in comparison to the one that you had there?
Well, I can understand that I definitely am just like focusing on the technicals instead of the emotional side of that. So, I mean, I definitely could dive deeper into the emotional aspect of why I'm exactly doing that.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I understand like it's hard because it's like you have so much knowledge on the technical side. It's like a default reaction to kind of want to just go there thinking that's where the answers are. Mm-hmm. And so we almost have to, again, kind of get out of our comfort zone and feel a little bit more uncomfortable digging through this side of it, because I mean, again, I think this is very clearly articulated. So what's now the flaw here?
Well, I mean, the flaw is that if I jump into these trades and I don't follow my plan, then I'll lose money. I'm not going to make money.
Okay. So the other thing that I would add here, which is tougher in a sense to kind of see on your end, right? Yes, this is logical. If I jump into all these trades, I'm not going to make money. So it's just like the thesis that you're going with, like the impulsivity is not going to give you the results that you want. But like, what do you feel like is really driving the impulsivity? Is it actually maybe connected to confidence? Like as if, right, I don't want to wait to see if I'm successful in this trade is actually maybe a more macro. I don't want to wait to see if I'm going to be successful as a trader or as successful as I want to be.
Right. I mean, I feel like it definitely is tied to confidence or, possibly even like fear of failure. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. I just.
Yeah. So you have the opportunity to go deeper. We're not going to now, right? You could take that fear of failure and make that a new number one. Right. Or for right now, we could just simply say that like my attempts to be successful as a trader are going to make it more likely that I fail. So the thing that I'm fearing is going to become more likely. Right. So what's the correction, right? I can make a choice to be willing to fail in order to succeed, because if I keep doing this, then I'm guaranteed to fail.
Right. Right.
How does that feel to you?
Well, I mean, it makes sense when you say it like that.
Okay. Yeah. So that making sense, does it feel like now you could take some of that logic and bring it back here, and I think maybe apply it probably closer at the
Jared, I think you have to reveal the document you're showing now. We're still on the mental health history.
Right. There we go. Thank you. Yeah. So I think it would maybe kind of apply it, kind of one of these early like 1, 2, and 3 levels.
To put in there that, like, don't be impulsive.
Yeah, to put in there something effective, right? Impulsivity is going to cause me to fail. And, if I'm impulsive because I don't want to fail, it's going to cause me to fail. It's like, it's causing me to think. So I like take a step back, make the right decisions, and become the trader you want to be by making the right decisions. Some kind of a reframe like that. If you are calling out that the fear of failure is present here, right? Sometimes that can actually have a more jarring effect in a way, kind of disrupting your existing kind of the existing momentum. And then that logic can come in and be a bit more clear. I'm not saying that calling it out is the method of disruption you want to use. I'm just saying that sometimes for some clients, right, when you call things out as like bluntly as that, sometimes it can help to just kind of jar your mind out of this pattern.
Yeah. So I think that I do need to tailor these a bit more to what I personally am emotionally feeling versus these rote cliche things that we just all say and that you read in all the trading books. So make it more personal to me. It's going to, bring me out of it easier than the thing that we all say to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Because these work for some people. Mm-hmm. If they don't work for you, then it means that they're not getting to the root of the issue, right? So now you're just kind of battling on the surface with these points of logic, trying to beat back those weeds, right? Beat back the problems that you're experiencing. But if they are not working, then that's where the digging has to go in. And that's where the mental hand history, really needs to be focused more on the psychological side of things.
Right.
Okay. And I see a line in here. So thank you so much, Grant, for joining us. I appreciate it. And so you see a question here about, it's difficult to know what questions to ask ourselves to take us deeper. And so I'll continue as I go through more examples of the mental hand histories to kind of call out like what I'm seeing. But the basic kind of lens with which you can look is as you're reading through things that you're writing, right? Whether it's in steps 1, 2, or 3, or even 4, identify stuff that is technical, right? You could even kind of color code it, right? Go right across as you're reading. Everything that is technical, put it into a particular color. And then everything that is not becomes psychological. And that's the things that I was picking up on when I was recognizing those traders who were becoming a bit more technically oriented. And so then you kind of key in on the words that you're using, right? So, Brian just used the word or the phrase fear of failure, right? That kind of being part of it. Perfection, mentioned another one, right? We're looking at these words that help us to give clues as to what those issues might be. And then you kind of focus yourself just on the psychological side and you can just keep asking the why question. It doesn't have to necessarily be, overly dramatic. And I think I've had a lot of experience doing this, so that's why I can phrase questions in a more direct way. But that's, I think, the next way to do it. All right. So here's next example. And again, just to kind of cue Steve, I'm going to have you come up after this slide here. All right. So let me get to, here we go. Okay, so this comes from a trader who told me that they were having trouble accurately differentiating whether it's a fear or a confidence issue. Again, right, you're not the only one struggling to do this, right? Many overlapping issues. And so, yeah, don't worry at the end of the day about the messiness, right? As I've just said, just make sure that you're nailing down what you're experiencing in real time, because ultimately this is designed to help you take that first step in the correcting your pattern process, to be able to recognize your emotions in real time, recognize that your pattern has been triggered in real time. Okay, so if we look here, level 1 is defined as ideal confidence. Okay, so just a point of feedback, you don't need to disrupt that, right? And you don't need an injecting logic statement if you've defined something that is optimal. Now, if you want an injecting logic statement to help to keep you there, then it has to be something that is designed to correct whatever it is that's causing you to get out of that state, right? Which is where the remainder of this starts to come in. Now, what I will say is that, so if we remove level 1 from this map here, and the what's written, we really only have level 3, which is occurring before level 7. And so when you've got level 7, 8, and 10 very, very cleanly written out, which are quite problematic, and you certainly can read through to understand what's there, the rest of you. When we only have like one level that's defined prior to that, it can be a bit dangerous, right? Because severe mistakes become imminent. Once you get past that, it's like you only have like kind of one barrier with which to kind of catch yourself. And if you miss it, then you're pretty much guaranteed to make some mistakes of some size. So I would suggest that you continue to work to map the pattern, either prior to level 3, right, just below that ideal confidence, or when the doubting of your gut, starting to think about your perception of the market is accurate, or starting to wonder whether what comes just after that and before down on the money for a larger than normal loss. And issues thereof, right? So the other thing is that the injecting logic, is missing there as well. So you've got level 3, but now missing logic that's going to help to fight against it. All right, so let's get to your mental hand history here, and this one applies to level 8. Okay, and I know this because there was a clear connection, right? So level 8 injecting logic is written. Is written here. Okay, this is strong, right? So getting the psychological problem is done here. There's some logic that certainly can help to kind of shore up the confidence. Now, to go a step deeper, I think it's necessary to kind of break through and look a bit closer at the answer in step 2. Okay, so let's just look at this. I lose confidence when I'm down a significant portion of my capital and start wondering if my system is working, and begin to take bigger positions to try to make my money back. Why does it make sense? I can't help to think if it's going to be another time where I lose a majority of the capital and will affect supporting myself and my family in the future. And maybe if I double down and get lucky, I may just make back the losses and get to break even and can restore to normal sizing. Okay, explain why the logic is flawed. I'm looking at the P&L too much and focusing too much on the results rather than on the process. I've tested the strategy and I know it's going to work in the long run. And being already in a losing streak, chances are that I'm already not thinking rationally and not at peak performance, and making bigger position sizes will likely amplify the consequences of the losses. So yes, all of that is correct. Okay, but if you want to go a bit deeper, we would focus on this phrase in step 2, which is, if I double down and get lucky and get back to break even, then I'll restore normal sizing. Okay. Traders do this all the time, right? You're effectively like negotiating with yourself to get what you want. You want to double down, right? The problem is, right, or the assumption is that if you actually were to get back to break even, that this is the last time that you'll do this, right? Which is obviously not the case. Okay. You know that this is not going to be the last time you're going to do this spot. And actually, if we're hopeful that it could be, you can't even guarantee that that's the case. Okay. And plus, by actually doubling your position now, you'll make it more likely, not less likely, that you'll do it in the future, because under emotional pressure, we revert back to our ingrained habits. Okay. So it's actually in this moment where you have the opportunity to do something fundamentally different, right? Close the position, take the loss, and learn how to handle it. So I'm not calling that out as necessarily a dramatic change to your mental hand history. I'm calling it out as, again, right, for those of you looking for places to dig, right, this is a place where you can dig and try to pull out some additional perspective or new logic that can help. All right. Looks like a lot of people can relate to that one. All right. Good stuff. All right. Oh, actually, okay. So there we go. I was highlighting that one. And okay. So let's get to Steve, if you're available to come on here.
And Steve, I just allowed you to unmute yourself. There you go. How's it going, Steve?
Yeah. Hi. How's it going?
Hey, Steve. Thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. All right. So this is your map and real-time strategy. And you said that you feel like you've got so many biases causing you issues. When you watched the bonus video, you felt like you're related to 80% of the items mentioned. I can understand why that's problematic, and maybe we'll try to tease some things out here for you. So I think your map is really good, including your strategic reminder. You're injecting logic statements in the first 2 levels are good as well. So let's just kind of read those. Level 1, focus on entries that fit your criteria, and you'll be proud to see in my journal. Number 2, there will be plenty of chances to get in a trade. If you miss this one, focus on the next level on the plan. Then by level 3, I start to worry that, maybe a bit more kind of technically oriented here, right? Take plan trades that fit your criteria. This is why the level is on the plan. And so when the emotion's starting to creep up to that level, to switch into something technical gives me the kind of cue that might be where, it might be a point to kind of dig from a mental hand history standpoint. So, if we look at level 3, we're talking about fear of FOMO leads to the potential of being over patient. Maybe if you want to kind of just describe that problem a little bit, we'll maybe do a bit of a mental hand history on the fly here.
Well, I'd say after, maybe a couple losses and considering entering trades that aren't in an area of planned interest, that when it does reach an area of planned level or planned interest, that I might be more hesitant due to the fact that, the last couple trades didn't work out the way I wanted to. Got it.
Okay. And so the hesitancy, so it would make sense that the hesitancy is there because of what you just said, right? That there's the last couple of trades have not worked out. So then what would be the flaw then in that logic?
Well, I guess that's kind of a lack of confidence, or just me being afraid to stick to the plan and stick to, the criteria that I'm looking for, and disregard the previous results and just focused on the current setup.
Yeah. Well said. So now having just sort of said that, is there any, would you say that what you just said is any new insight to you, or is this things that you've already known well?
Well, I think it's something that I realize, but but I guess, this type of thoughts that pop in my mind, they can actually happen after, a couple wins or a couple losses. Do I really want to take another trade? Even though for whatever reason it looks good, it looks great, but I guess the there's a lack of confidence, and also there's a fear of, if I take another loss, how am I going to react to that? After that.
Yeah. So listen, I would strongly urge you to go back to the recording, to this spot, and actually just write out a lot of what you just said, right? At level 3, right? I mean, there's just so much more detail in here in what you've described. And I get that it can be hard at times when it's just sort of just you with a piece of paper trying to, examine your thoughts. So was there something fundamentally different about me asking you a question, or was it if you were to try to replicate what just happened on your own, how do you think you could do it?
How would I replicate what I just said, or why I just said it?
How would you replicate pulling more of these details out of your brain? Because there's nothing that you just said that I'm sure you haven't thought about before, but you're able to tease it out and describe it with a lot more clarity than is kind of written in your map here right now. So how do you think you can kind of get these thoughts out better on your own?
I guess it would be me just analyzing, the thoughts that are going through my head in that specific moment in time, and writing down, what am I seeing and how am I reacting to what I'm seeing?
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to do. I mean, I'm not by any means suggesting that it's easy, but it's that extra effort to really examine what's there in these key moments, because in those key moments, there's the gold. I mean, I would call it gold. What you just pulled out is gold, because that transforms, right, what you've got in terms of your injecting logic, because you're now analyzing what's actually happening from a completely different perspective, because you have data that suggests that it's more complicated than just this fear of FOMO that leads to potential of being overpatient. That ain't it at all. So great stuff, man. All right. So I was going to go over a mental hand history with you, but I feel like we just did it, and I don't want to get too much time. You're going to keep ourselves moving. So great work. Here's, just for your own sake, I'll just put it up here. My revision to a mental hand history that you posed that would basically kind of be right at level 10, right? Going right for the jugular. So if you start with this one and revise it, I'll take a look at it before the next webinar.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good. Yep.
So here we are. Next example. Great map here. Very clear progression. And I'm going to review a mental hand history of theirs, and have highlighted a few points that will kind of help to frame what's in that mental hand history. Okay. So in step 2, I've had a string of losses or have traded poorly and start to have doubts about my ability or my system. I am hesitant about the market, right? I start researching other indicators or techniques, systems that might complement my system. Level 10, I feel like I have so much conflicting information because I've looked at way too many angles, indicators, and systems. Okay, so when we look at this mental hand history, there's some good stuff in here, but if we start to look at step 4, and I know I'm kind of jumping, I want to just call this out. I've taken my time to create a trading plan for the day. There's no need to inject other thoughts, plans into my own trading. Trust your analysis and trade your plan. The feeling that I got from reading that is a bit of like what Brianne was mentioning before, where it just sounds like something that's nice that a lot of you may say to help you feel better, and to really kind of trust your own analysis and trust your system. But you're not really getting to the heart of why it is that you're not trusting it in the first place. And that, I think, is how the mental hand history really needs to be framed. Okay. So describe the problem. My system works, but I don't trust my own analysis and wait for confirmation from others, i.e. mentor peers, before initiating a position. My confidence is low, although I've done my homework and I know that I have a system that works. I don't want to incur any more losses. I want to do things the right way. More experienced traders are the ones that tell me what is right or wrong. Again, I think this is a way to get a bit deeper into the heart as to why it is that you're not trusting your analysis or trading your plan. And again, I do realize that this is hard, okay? But that's the next step to take here. Okay. So let me keep going here. We'll see if there's any questions that anything from the chat. Yeah, I see some people talking about, talking things out loud, very helpful. The Hey Siri, yes, exactly. You could there's some pretty cheap recording software that's available. I've used one called Audacity. I think it is free. It's it looks more complicated once you get to it, but it's actually very simple. Another question. All right, so Ron's saying, here's a larger issue from my perspective. This is an extremely different market to trade successfully from any direction. So a lot of frustration and mistakes are attributed to this. There's a much higher chance of losing trades. No amount of logic is going to change this. So how are others adapting their mental game to this? And aren't our homework assignments being skewed by this? I mean, it's possible, but I mean, I've worked with clients through many, many different market cycles. And yeah, maybe there's some skewing of some of the negativity, but I think anytime that you're under extreme or more extreme pressure, that is just a deeper test of what actually is being experienced. When you are under pressure, your weaknesses get exposed. And so we can actually kind of flip it in the other direction and say, well, that's actually the opportunity, right? Because it might be easier in a market like this to better understand your mentality because the problems are going to be bigger, right? Because just because the market conditions are doing that or might become more favorable doesn't mean those issues are going to go away. They're just going to get hidden. So, if you're going to be able to kind of thrive in multiple different markets and multiple different market cycles, you have to have these things kind of rooted out and corrected. So let's take the opportunity for what it is. And I'm realizing the time. So why don't we just kind of take a break here? I'll answer some of these questions because I'm still good to go. For those who want to break, we'll just come back at 12:42 Eastern time, so 42 minutes after the hour. We'll come back and I'll move through, but I'll just be answering some questions here. So Shiva's asking, what might be the reason for revenge trading, overtrade after small profit? Is it greed or overconfidence or wanting to win every time? Yeah, I mean, there could be lots of reasons. But for revenge trading to be the case, there's always a confidence component to it. So yes, wanting to win every time could certainly be that. Small trade, could, kind of spark this desire to not just want to win every time, but to want to win more and more and more, right? The sort of it's never good enough flaw could be in there, which sometimes can be related to perfectionism. All right, Jeff is asking, when the emotion is flared up and active, is it mentally possible to inject the logic in real time, or does it take time to cool off before the logical brain can be involved? Yes. So when emotions flared up, if that logic is sharp, right, you have the opportunity to kind of chip into it. Now, if the emotion is small and that logic is a bit duller than is ideal, it will still work, right? If the emotion's big, you need a really sharp mind in order to cut through it. So it's not necessarily kind of a binary thing. It's somewhat dependent on how well that logic is trained, how strong it is in your mind, right? And the strength that you have in being able to kind of force your way through it. But that's where that disruption comes in. And so, we want to disrupt the pattern first. That's a way of kind of priming the mind to accept and receive that logic. And so, yes. All right. So stop trading for the day is not considered as controlling and managing the problem, then resolving it. No, stopping for the trading day can be considered managing the problem, but in the short term, right, it's okay to manage problems. Right? I'm not asking you to kind of walk on broken legs or walk on sprained ankles, right? You can manage problems, right? But it's over the long term, right? You recognize that it is that you are managing the problem and you're not actually resolving it. And so that you keep working to resolve the problem. All right. Diane, where did Diane go? In a market where many may not be active and are just sitting on the sidelines, therefore not experiencing many of these triggers emotions, how do we go about these exercises right now? Yeah, so that actually would be the much tougher thing to work out. You basically have to be looking more at a historical record, going back into the past, looking at past trades, past scenarios where you've struggled, or if there are specific emotional triggers that you may have. Like I've got, one client of mine who runs a small, hedge fund. Small fund is not really even a hedge fund. A small fund managing about $4 million, and for him, the issue was not getting chopped up in a market like this, and really being more selective, so that when there were real opportunities, that he was not kind of chopped up both from a P&L standpoint, but also from an emotional standpoint. So if that is something that you may struggle with, then make sure that you're kind of mapping those kind of triggers or patterns as well. Okay. While we are all undigging a lot of our problems, technical and psychological, is there actually any danger that analysis paralysis or some form of negative effect on our trading can occur? And would it be helpful to overthink our beliefs in the importance of our issues, being careful not giving too much importance and keep a positive attitude? Statements like "we are perfect the way we are," etc. Yeah, I mean, listen, yes, I don't want you to get kind of lost and mired in this. But if analysis paralysis happens, then you can look at the fear or the perfectionism that may actually be driving that a little bit, right? The analysis paralysis is, kind of a symptom of what's going on, because you might have expectations that things might be, a bit more clear for you, and they're not yet. And so the sort of discomfort with the discomfort, is something that, can be addressed, right? And it just becoming more open-minded, becoming more accepting of the situation, right? Perfect the way you are, sure, right? Whatever ideas that can help to stabilize you, for sure. All right, can I touch upon amateur traders going prop for the first time in terms of confidence? I feel like a new trader all over again now that I'm trading other people's money. I feel inadequate at sometimes. Yeah, so I mean, anytime you kind of are climbing the ranks in any industry, trading included, right? The things that you feel like you kind of mastered from a mental and emotional standpoint, sometimes even a technical standpoint, when you get, in a new context, in this case, trading other people's money, it can expose weaknesses that you either had been able to solve, you had solved previously. So these were a known issue that is now being re-experienced, or it's a new issue that is coming up because of the circumstances. And so process is the same, right? Describe the problem, break through it using the mental hand history. And, if it's something that is, kind of very scaled, like you're seeing in real time, then you can create a map for it. If it's just something that's more global, right, and is sort of ever present, kind of running in the background, then the mental hand history and then the injecting logic statements is really where you're going to want to focus. All right. Let me get to one more question and then we'll, all right. So, we get to Jeff's follow-up question, previous question about injecting logic. I've actually experienced almost like an intuition that this is happening live, but I find a real struggle to actually step away and let that emotion dissipate. Listen, I mean, this is, so when I've talked about that really sticky point, where the emotion is strong enough to compromise you, but not strong enough that it like shuts down your mind completely, you can be very aware of what's happening, right? So this intuition that's happening live is you actually have it getting like close to breaking through and being able to do something different. So keep your feet on the fire, keep yourself in this as long as you can, right? I promise you're close to breaking through. I'm sure many of you have seen that image where, somebody is like this close to kind of digging out the diamond and they just like turn and walk the other direction, right? So you're close, man. Stay in it. All right. I know I didn't get to all your questions. I will later on. Okay. So let me think here. All right. So Paul, I'm going to bring you on next after this slide. So if you can kind of get yourself queued up, that'd be awesome. Okay. So this is a map of confidence where level 5 is stable or optimal. Okay. And in this case, overconfidence would be 1 to 4. And the injecting logic statements that are here are actually quite good. You can kind of pause and read through these, but it's clear that there's some work that's been done here. Methods of disruption are really strong as well. Where I think there's some issues is in kind of the low confidence side, right? And especially if we look at levels 9 and 10, how can I benefit from this situation? To me, that actually would be more of a method of disruption, right? Trying to break apart your reaction, but that's not something that you're injecting as a correction to the cause of that severity of emotion. So if we start to look at the mental hand history is really taking a lot of what's written in levels 6 through 9. All right, and so here's what's written. All right, I am slow to enter a trade. I see it setting up, but find reasons not to take the trade, even when I see it as a good trade. Then when the trade moves up, is it too late to enter? I beat myself up for missing a good trade. I might get cheap and not enter the best possible price I saw, and then don't adjust to take what the market was willing to give me. I end up with nothing because I'm not in the trade, then continue to track how the trade performs for no other reason than to beat myself up more about the trade I saw, but didn't have the courage or confidence to take. Okay. And so I think as we kind of get into steps 3 and 4 here, what happens is more of that departure into getting more on the technical side of things rather than the psychological. Okay. And especially what I would start to look at here in terms of what might be psychologically off, it's this. Okay. It makes sense to feel or act this way because I'm trying to reduce risk by taking the trade at the best possible low risk moment. I like a good deal. And if I could buy something at a lower price that I know for certain that I could sell at a higher price, I would do all that all day long, for certain. So the illusion of certainty, the illusion of control, the desire for certainty, the wish for certainty, right? That is what's flawed in step 3. Okay. So those are kind of the markers that we're looking for when, some of you are getting more technically oriented and need to get more psychologically focused. All right. But again, great work here. A lot of detail. All right. So, Paul, if you are there.
And Paul, I just allowed you to unmute yourself. There you go. How's it going, Paul?
Going well. How are you?
Hey, Paul, I see that red chip. Are you a poker player?
No, that's a work thing.
Okay. Well, there's a website called Red Chip Poker. So
familiar with that. Yes.
There you go. Perfect. All right. So listen, great job with the map. And I think you've done made a great attempt with the mental hand history. I just think it's maybe a bit cluttered and trying to do too much. I'll kind of share what that looks like here. Okay. I think anytime that there's like a large number of flaws, right, in step 3, that's going to suggest to you that there's kind of more pieces of the puzzle that need to be clearly articulated up top. But we'll get to that here in a second.
Okay.
And so when we look at the maps here, the injecting logic. So I did kind of do a little spoiler here about what I was focusing on. When we get into these injecting logic statements, and I think I'm totally fine, like once or twice saying, there's no reason, right? And I say that because sometimes for some of you, right, using negative language can actually be quite impactful in being able to stop, right, the reaction, right? It gives you that frame of mind. There's a clear understanding of what's going on. But when you use it this frequently, it starts to suggest that it's now being used as a weapon of suppression, and there isn't as much clarity, about what's actually happening. So let me just see what else I want to say here. And just, do you have any feedback on that? Just out of it.
Yeah. I think there's some underlying process weakness that still needs to be clarified, that probably is related to that. And I also can say that I think I was basing this sort of on the idea of scarcity and just not hesitating to take trades, but the progression really goes on the emotion side, goes from fear to anger. And like greed sort of jumps, like if I'm in a losing trade that is off plan, that's one of the worst times for me, because then as soon as I either I get stuck and I don't want to take the loss because then I get kind of caught in some weird logic loop, or I suddenly I get out and then I'm right at like 5 or 6 on the greed side, jumping right into that, skipping over everything else and kind of careening from there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I think there's multiple things. I think there's greed, and there's a big issue around losing that probably, I don't know if those are just, I need to do completely separate sheets on each of those.
Yeah. I mean, so this is, so I mean, okay. So let me just quickly show again, kind of, this is your, the mental hand history you did. And again, when we're trying to like kind of line up, like what to do mental hand histories for, we're really kind of pulling out, let's see, level 1, 2, 3, or the things that are kind of written in this left-hand column, but that becomes the beginning of the description for the first step. And so what I did for you here is kind of just give you a few options. Now, is there any one of these that you would want to focus on? Because I think the last one you just mentioned goes more to level 8, and I've got some ideas for you there. So I guess I'm going to skew your bias. I think we should do that one.
That's good. We'll go with that.
All right. Okay. So level 8 here, right? I add size to fix a mistake, convince price must finally revert. What does it matter? I've already screwed it up this day terribly. Might as well swing for the fences and try to go get green. All right. So in your mind, why does it make sense, right, that you're thinking that way?
I think at that point, I'm so far past what I should have done. I mean, I've made so many mistakes. What's one more mistake?
And is that thought new, or is it something that you've had before?
I don't know if I've ever put those words there other than just what I just said right now, but it makes sense. And it's, I mean, I can see why it sort of makes sense. It's logical, but it's not logical, because I mean, that next mistake could be terrible.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to put you on the hot seat, Paul, but do you think you're special? Do you think that you're brilliant? Do you? I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek because I want to call out the fact that what you just did is everyone has the potential to do. I think you've been working at this. The work that you put in is very robust. So you basically earn the right to generate insight like that. Is effectively kind of what I was prompting. But
yeah, probably. I guess there's a layer of that to me. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, right, this is, so as not just for you, for everybody else, right, as you take the next steps here, you are getting closer, right? This is evidence of this. Paul is a perfect, this idea just popped into his head, right? As we were kind of working through this. There's nothing I prompted other than saying, focus on level 8, all of his language, and out pops this insight, right? Or this elaboration. Okay. All of you are working in this direction. Do not stop. Do not quit. Keep working it because you're getting closer. So well done, man. So what's the flaw?
The flaw is, I mean, that next mistake could be an account killer. It could be, I mean, that's ridiculous. It's just to take anything. I need to focus on what my plan is and where my edge is.
Yeah. Okay. So we're getting into a little bit of correction here, but that's okay.
Okay.
It's so often kind of flows that way. So that next mistake could be an account killer, right? Mm-hmm. So this idea of like, what's one more mistake, right? What you're basically saying, like, is it's just like kind of an excuse that makes the problem at this level feel small and like just not that big a deal.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of avoiding the problem a little bit, or avoiding it. Yeah.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. And what I mentioned earlier today about how, like at any moment, you have the opportunity to make some progress, because if you continue to just say, F it, right? What's one more mistake? That's the thing that is going to continue to be most likely in these spots. Mm-hmm. If you were able to do something just slightly better, which would be just get the hell off the top,
yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. Or close it and get out, right? Yeah. But I would say, and this is some of the things. So yes, everything you've written here is great. The other thing I would kind of maybe call out, which goes back to what you've written at level 8 here. I don't have. Let me pull up my laser pointer here. At level 8 here, right? What does it matter? I've already screwed this day up terribly. Might as well swing for the fences and try to go green. if whoever knew this, knew I did this, what kind of idiot and loser would I think I am? I think that confidence piece is also in here, right? I think one of the elements. Son of a bitch. Where you just went. There we go. One of the elements that we could add in here, right, is this maybe something to the effect of, I don't want to close a position that I shouldn't have even been in, that I've dug myself a deeper hole, because if I do, I own it. And if I own it, that means that I have to look myself in the mirror and look at the idiot that just did that.
There's absolutely that. And on top of that, then it's also, what if I close it and then it does what I think I am, and then I'm wrong again on top of being wrong already. And
right. So let's just throw another wrong in there, because what's the harm at this point? Yeah. So again, I think the concern is that the fact that you have the I'm an idiot and a loser, right? Even though you may not think about that on a regular basis, right? It's in there. And so I actually would suggest that you do a mental hand history where, you're kind of describing your confidence in that way, right? And we know, or we assume, right, that it's just a small portion of what you're experiencing, because based off of everything else that you've written right here, right? This is not, you don't think that you're an idiot at all times of the day. So you don't have, it's just something that's in the back of your mind that just has to get called out and worked through and understood as to how it is that you could even believe that you could be an idiot. And it could be as simple as, well, growing up, right? It was just something we said to people, right? And so only idiots would do something like that. And we're not actually looking at intelligence or capacity or our competency as something that is can change, right? We look at ourselves or our capacity in a more permanent, kind of inflexible kind of way, versus, oh, I can be really smart and do something that's dumb, right? There's a difference between I did something that's dumb versus I'm dumb, right? Yep. And so kind of breaking that apart and understanding, right, that there is that difference. And no, I'm not an idiot. I just did something that's dumb, and it's a lot easier to fix something, because you can't fix yourself. I mean, you can't, you're just, it's like, I can't be, 5'9". There's that surgery that's out there now. But so good stuff, Paul. Thanks for joining us.
Right, thank you.
All right. So we're going to go into the lightning round here as we're jumping through here. So this and I'm just going to look at mental hand histories from this point forward, and kind of go a bit deeper here. So this mental hand history came from, and I was actually able to get a response from them via email. So I'm going to show you kind of several pieces. I will say the thing that I like first here, which is really smart, is that they actually added what category and level that this was coming from in their map. So I'm going to just kind of borrow that because I think it does create the link that many of you were struggling. Look, I've said that the system is not changing, but the way that it gets applied is changing and evolving. So yes, this is a user generated iteration that is very simple and genius in its own right. So here we go. All right. So what I like here is at the top is that like the problem exists in the map, right? And I basically had him answer these steps again with a new number one. And the reason I forget. So let me just read it real quick. I have to have positive P&L at the end of the day. If my first or second trade are negative, I almost immediately go into a mode where I feel like I have to get my money back. I cannot make myself walk away for the day with a small loss. I see this profession as lucrative, and most of my external trading contacts are on social media, where I mostly see good outcomes. I've been doing this long enough to know that it is possible to be profitable. What's the flaw here? My expectations are too high and causes my decisions to be based on feel-good information only. I know the truth as I studied and learned from many before me, but when it comes time for the rubber to meet the road, I'm not interested in bad information. What is the correction? I need more a more constant reminder of the facts around the truth regarding my success rate and the expectancy of my strategy. I need reminders that not every trade is a winner, but over time, I will succeed if I continue to follow my plan, which needs to include walking away when behind. So in general, I would say this is well done. What prompted me to, ask for more information here is that the answers in step 4, again, kind of had that flavor of sounds nice, right? I need reminders that not every trader is a winner. Well, why is it, right, that you need those reminders? That was what was kind of pinging in my head, right? Because again, so if you get those reminders, does that help solve this, or is there maybe a bit something else? So here's the new problem as I described. The beginning is the same. I cannot make myself walk away for the day with a small loss. I see great outcomes on social media. Yeah, so basically, I just kind of consolidated a lot of the answer. And so here was the elaboration. Okay, so we look at step 2. We are greatly influenced by what we see on social media and what we are most exposed to in life. If all we knew in life is good stuff, then that tends to be our bias. The same goes if we are exposed to not so good things. Therefore, it only makes sense that I should be like everyone else. Why is that logic flawed? Social media and our direct exposure to different events and experiences in life by different people are only actually paint a small picture of reality. I imagine if my Twitter feed was primarily filled with the real struggles of traders, I might have a more realistic understanding of the truth of trading success and failure, and successes and failures. So I mean, like this is, you can see what you are all capable of, right? Great insight, raw and real. And here's what they said about kind of going through this kind of elaboration process. It felt like I was peeling off another layer of the onion, so to speak, almost like doing a root cause analysis, where you just keep asking why at every layer as you go deeper and deeper, right? And you realize things that you would have never expected at the beginning. So, we've seen that a lot today. Those of you who have not spoken to, you're all capable of this. It's just great stuff. All right, lightning round continues. So this comes from Ron. Said that he was having trouble getting the data collection worksheet synced up with the maps that were in a useful way. And I think maybe why that's difficult is there might be a kind of a bigger confidence issue that may seem to be evident, I think, here, that may be making it harder for you to distinguish some of the details. Like, I think I described this a bit ago, where sometimes there is this sort of macro, big picture confidence issue that is just kind of running in the background, and that's causing the data that you're seeing to not really kind of line up in a very useful, organized way, because you're not really sure what the heck that thing is. And so in general, I think your mental line history is good. But what really kind of pinged my head was, in step 4, I need to trust myself, my intuition, and have conviction when I feel a trade is correct. I have very good hunches about the market, and am good at making the right trade at the right time. And I think that's, we've said that several times before. So, what can we do here? Reframe the entire thing. I'm really not confident in my trades. I don't trust myself and lack the conviction I need. Maybe that's too strong, right? Again, it's not quite as global as I'm describing it, but maybe it's like at times I'm really not confident. And so you'd want to be more elaborate more as to what's happening at those moments, right? Why you don't trust yourself in those moments, why you lack the conviction you need, because that is what's going to help you to really dig in and maybe have a different perspective of what's happening on the surface. Okay. So think about this. I'm actually going to skip this one because I want to get to, I think just a more clear example of some of these more kind of technically driven mental hand histories, right? So this is actually, I've got no feedback here other than to say that this is a great mental hand history for just the technical side of trading. Okay. So there's nothing psychological that I would add here. You can read through it, right? Now, I don't know if this person needs something on the psychological side to work through, but I do want to call out the fact that you can use the mental hand history for both sides to actually kind of clean up some of the faulty logic that you may have around your system or strategy. So many of you have kind of veered in that direction. I'm going to give you another example of one. Okay. And show you how to kind of work around the technical stuff that you may be focused on in your mental hand histories. But yeah, I just wanted to call this out as a great example of just looking at it from that perspective. And I have worked with, some clients that are, they tend to be a bit more advanced, where all we're focused on is actually like kind of breaking down the faulty logic and their technical abilities. And even though I don't necessarily have the lens with which to evaluate the viability of what they're describing, I can help to kind of parse out the flaws that are there, because it's just about identifying kind of where that faulty logic is in the way you're describing something. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a problem. But if you identify a problem, right, then by definition, there must be something that's off. Okay. So let's go through an example of one that mental hand history that kind of veers more towards the technical. I'm slow to run or exit the position when the trade moves against me. Why does that make sense? I feel that I'm the strong hand versus the rest of the weak hands in the market, and I'm confident that my pick is right and will reverse. I can withstand while others capitulate. Why is that logic flawed? There's absolutely no way to know how far the move will go against me when it violates my initial entry and then my mental stop. I am not stronger than the market. I cannot know how far prices will go against me. What's the correction of that flawed logic? If my initial gets invalidated, run exit, right, wait for new trigger. All right, so here, all of a sudden, now you've got a logic statement that is really should be as part of your strategic reminder, right? It's not actually correcting the psychological side of this. So, right, so here is some new options for a logic statement. I can't predict the future. That's not even my job. When my initial idea gets invalidated, my job is to exit and wait for a new trigger. Right? Why is that correction correct? If I really knew how far the move would go, then I would be psychic and would be far more accurate in my predictions. Okay. Now you also could, just like kind of start again, right? And bring this whole thing up to the top and make it a new number one by saying, a part of me believes that I know how far the move will go against me when it violates my initial entry and then my mental stop. I believe that I'm stronger than the market and know how far prices will go. I've mentioned this before, right? When you start to include language that is negative in nature, right? It's not always this way, but there are times where you can kind of just flip it on its head because that's actually what you believe. Okay, and that's kind of what's being described here. All right, I think we've got to move on just to keep ourselves on time. So let me just look at some questions here. See what. All right. All right. In relation to using negative or positive, I've been focusing on the idea of no C game and repeating that over and over. But sometimes I wonder if having this focus on what to avoid as opposed to what I need to do means I should be repeating only A and B game. Instead, do you think there is a big difference between using these two? Do I think there's a big difference? No. Do I think there's a difference? Yes. And the answer could be just kind of time and place, right? So your first job should be no C game. Your second job should then be only A and B game. So you can have them happening simultaneously. And, as you have maybe gotten better at the no C game one, now you can start to add in the only A and B game. The thing about the only A and B game is that it's aspirationally great, right? But I wouldn't make it an expectation, because if you start to make an expectation, then C game is going to become more likely. And then you got to figure out, what are the parameters? How are you going to be able to actually kind of live by that only A and B game creed? All right. If we, what an idiot I am, when our brain will confirm I am an idiot, how to differentiate it with a positive term. It's less about like just kind of flipping it. It's more you're not like confirming it, right? Your brain actually already has that thought. So if you're trying to actually, kind of break through, you want to already understand that you have confirmed that you believe that, and now you have to figure out why. And maybe, what I suggested to Paul could be the reason for that. Tom is asking how the tournament went. I'll maybe say that at the end. All right, Vanessa, I have difficulty streamlining my strategic map as I feel I have so many layers for each level. Any advice? Iterate more. Should I have many strategic maps? So I just want to make sure our language is clear here. So are you saying strategic reminder or the map in terms of your emotion? So if we're assuming that there's many layers for each level from a strategic standpoint, then I might kind of put you more with the Richard Trader Line guys to, kind of better tease out a system or a strategy that, probably needs to be consolidated. If it's more on the mental and emotional side, then not for the map. Okay. So yeah, so it's more for the mental and emotional sides. so I think if you've got many layers, that's not necessarily problematic. It means that you're now aware of things. So yes, it's okay to kind of deal with kind of greater depth at each problem. Typically, when you get deeper, it means that there's a kind of a more global, kind of in the background kind of problem. And I would prioritize mapping the stuff at the surface that you see, and then doing mental hand histories for the things that are deeper, and then injecting logic that reflects the deeper stuff, because what's happening on the surface is coming from the deep stuff. That's how I would do it. So I wouldn't drive yourself crazy with all the details, deep depth wise. You just want to have your map clean enough so that it helps you to recognize that the problem has been triggered in real time, so that you then can go through the process, and then the injecting logic comes from the deeper stuff. Okay. All right. So I'm going to do a couple things, and then we'll take our second break. And yeah, sorry to have to go through all these other mental hand histories. I guess some kind of general feedback here as I go through the sort of general feedback and takeaways here. So yeah, like I said earlier, maps are looking great. I really would strongly encourage you all to just continue to work on them and iterate on them until they become as solid as you want them to be. And if you have specific questions, right, your specific struggles, just like Vanessa did, ask me specific questions, post them before the next webinar, and I'll be sure to answer them. All right, so then the maps and the real-time strategy, right, again, just make sure that you're connecting the mental hand history to the logic statement. And how do you do that? Well, we got a great example of it before, right? Actually take what you've written, in that left column, right? In the mapping part of the emotion, the reaction, that becomes, what you're applying in step one of the mental hand history, right? So at every level that you've mapped, right? Let's say you've mapped 5 different levels from 1 to 10. You can do 5 different mental hand histories. To Vanessa's questions, right? Sometimes as you go deeper into these layers, you'll find that all 5 have to do with the exact same freaking thing. Okay. Could be related to the wish that you can make easy money, right? And so that is related to all of them. And so then your injecting logic statements could actually be, either similar or slight variations of that, all along the way. And that would be completely fine. Some of you may find, no, actually, there isn't, one problem. I do 5 mental hand histories. I find 5 different things. And so then I need mental hand history, injecting logic statements for all 5, but you're not going to find that out until you go through the mental hand history process. Okay. And then the strategic reminder, remember, this is a critical part of the system. And so I'd say if there's the kind of the biggest new thing to be adding that for the majority of you is that before the next webinar in 2 weeks. And then mental hand history, again, I think the key I've said many times is make sure you get to that psychological side of the problem. And if you need to really kind of isolate what those things are, just like do some color coding, underline those sections that you can say firmly are not technical, and then focus on that stuff as you get into step 3 and step 4. Okay. So this was the spoiler alert from before, right? Just remember, if you've tried for 2 weeks to correct a problem, correct an error, a mistake, and you make no progress, okay, that does not mean that you can never make progress. It does not mean that you are a failure and that you'll never be able to get on the other side of this thing. It just simply means that you don't fully understand why that problem is happening yet. Okay. And so what are you going to do? You keep digging, right? Take what you've written in steps 2 and 3, revise that as a new step 1. Take the maps that you've been pulling out and look for the psychological stuff that maybe, I think if I were to give one more piece of feedback that I was honestly a little bit surprised about, that bonus video in the document has that laundry list of, types of flaws that are potential. Like there really were not a lot of line items in steps 3 that were evidence of that. And I can promise you that many of you have those things that are there. It's not to say that you have to use that, but if you are stuck, right, and you're not making progress, then go and watch that bonus video from webinar 2, read through that list and see which ones kind of jump out of your mind, because if there is something new, again, like many of the examples of people that came on today, that right, there is very, very many of you have learned so much in the last several weeks that you are getting closer. And so you don't necessarily know what thing might be the catalyst to breaking through. So go back and review those. All right. So let's talk about this idea of accumulated emotion as an X factor, because if you don't understand that it is what's happening at certain moments, you're going to really misinterpret why you're failing, right, and why you're struggling. And so I'm going to go through a list of some of these X factors that are very kind of common examples that, kind of make the mental hand history, the mapping process more difficult. And so you need to kind of know that these things are here so that when you're going through those processes, you have a full picture of what's going on and you understand what is really causing your emotions, causing your reactions to be so disproportionate to what you feel is reasonable. Right? Because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to devise a proper strategy. All right. So I'm just going to give you a kind of a handful of the ones that are most common, and looking at our time, it's clear we're going to go over. I can't, there's just too much. So, all right. Past losses. I can't tell you the number of clients who in their new client questionnaire talk about how they've lost 50K, 100K, 600K, right? And they feel like they're in this deep hole and can't get out of it, right? Even though they're profitable now, even though they've developed a winning strategy now, there's this extra level of pressure and burden, and they feel like they've got to just get out of that hole, and they can't get out of it fast enough. So they oftentimes are kind of derailing their progress because, several winning days, winning weeks still doesn't feel good enough because they're still deep in the hole. They feel like they're behind. They're trying to make up for it quickly. Okay. And so one kind of change that you can do here, call it like a kind of step 4 correction, would be just changing your perspective on what those losses actually mean to you. So you could look at it as like the research and development for your trading operation, right? Those losses came, but they eventually woke you up, right? If you're here, you're doing the work. That means that those losses were valuable because whatever perspective you had when you came into trading was clearly off, right? And you dug yourself a deep enough hole because you were not aware of perhaps the psychological impact that it could have on your results, or you weren't even aware that you needed to have any skills in this game to be successful. So research and development, right? And then you become kind of like this company that's trying to recoup that investment. Well, how is a company going to do that correctly? Well, they're not going to just try to just spray the market, right? Just hoping to make their money back. They're going to have, go through stages, right? Proof of concept, proof of market, and then ultimately get that thing to market. So going through those different phases, you can just reorient yourself in your process differently. All right. Dealing with, so here's just kind of one mental hand history that speaks to this. Okay. Describe the problem. I want to make money quickly. Explain why that makes logical sense. In the last 12 years of my intermittent trading and investing, I've lost a significant amount of time and money. I could have paid my mortgage instead. I need and deserve to recoup all of that. In everything I've done in my life, be it studies, work, exercise, there is clear correlation between effort and reward. I've put in enough effort, so I need my returns and rewards. That's the law of life. Effort equals rewards. Anything else is not fair. So anything from that point below is not really getting to the likely accumulated emotion that is around those past losses that need to be addressed, right? And so you might actually need to do a mental hand history on just whatever emotion you have related to those past losses and look at it as I'm still holding on to these losses because blank, and that becomes step 1 of your mental hand history. Right? And the same thing can be said for past mistakes, right? The past mistakes that you can't forgive yourself for. I have a client who had 3 million Dogecoins back, I want to say it was like, late 2019, and sold them for a small, but not very sizable profit. And this was a very, very painful thing for this client to work through, as you can imagine. And it took several sessions for us to dig it out. But as it turned out, at the heart of it was a confidence issue that was very small in the rest of his life, but was clear once we actually started to look more closely at it. So basically what you can do in the mental hand history and go through a very similar process that I did with this client, right? Describe the mistake and kind of what you're holding on to, right? And then write out why you can't forgive yourself. Okay. And so in that process, we were able to tease out, right, that there was something within his confidence. And so he was kind of looking for this big win, which I think would have been around, almost like a $2 million position after maybe a $10,000, $20,000 investment, life-changing money, especially for where he lived. And yeah, there was a part of him that was seeking a massive windfall to kind of correct the weakness that he had in his confidence. And so it was unforgivable because he kind of failed himself. He felt like he failed when in reality, right, he already felt like a failure before he even took the first position. So, I mean, that's going deep. I'm not suggesting that all of you have to go that deep in terms of what's causing you to hold on to your past mistakes, but that's just an example of what you might find. External pressure, right? Some of you are experiencing financial stress, right? There's just money is tight. Or as we've said, the external pressure coming from trading somebody else's money. The pressure coming from needing to prove that this has not been a colossal waste of time, or not wanting to prove the doubters right for whomever might be questioning the viability of trading as an enterprise for you. So that external stress can be, an X factor in terms of what significantly increases the amount of emotion you're experiencing. It has to be accounted for. Strong desire to avoid failing and not wanting to make it. Strong desire to fail, wanting to make it and not go back to a real job. Now, there are several clients that I have, both from the professional golf world, the professional poker world, and from trading, for whom they actually needed to take these steps back. And I say that because at some point their weaknesses were going to get exposed, whether they would be technical or mental. Right. And so all of them really suffered when they had to go back and get other jobs. Or the trader I mentioned was an institutional one, and he had to go, got kind of taken off of the desk and was put in the risk department. It was like kind of the worst outcome he could have imagined. But thankfully, we were able to have a conversation where not just him, but all of them were able to kind of redefine their perspective on what that step back actually meant. Okay. And when they got to see that it was inevitable, that it was going to happen, and it would have been way worse were it to happen, kind of at the height of their career. It was actually better that it happened now, right? And they start to look more pragmatically at what their weaknesses actually were, right? What were some of the things that were eventually going to hold them back? And then in an environment that it was a lot kind of less intense, they were able to work on their weaknesses and get better at them. And then all of them were able to actually progress back up. And I don't know where all of them are now, but at least reach levels that would be defined as success, right? Was it the ultimate success? I'm not really sure. But I'm saying all this because sometimes the intense desire to avoid failing can be reconciled with the idea that if you actually were to fail, it actually wouldn't be as bad as you think. And the failure can be great lessons and teachers. And we all kind of heard stories of like that. But the pragmatic part of it is that the failure happened for a predictable reason. And if you can understand what that was, then you can actually strengthen either elements of yourself technically or mentally, and then give yourself an opportunity to climb back up. The last one I'll mention is recent results. I'll very oftentimes having your best month ever, your best year ever, or significantly negative results can do the exact same thing, right? Where there's a lot of emotion to back up a great year, back up a great month. And very often that comes as a consequence of not having your confidence be strong enough. Right? You want your confidence to be strong enough to support what you've achieved kind of at the top, and envision it kind of like a pyramid, right? Some of you have climbed so high and achieved so much that it actually feels like the pyramid's inverted and it's so unstable that you feel like you're just going to kind of teeter over and can't back up. And so you feel like you're kind of sabotaging those situations, right? And again, I know, you know how I feel about the word sabotage. It's not sabotage. It's that your confidence is not strong enough to support the idea that you could be that good. And maybe you're not. Maybe you actually had a lot of luck. And so you're not trying to back up that great month. You're trying to back up, great execution. Like that's where the changes can come. But again, I think framing it that way is something related to confidence that can help you to understand maybe where that accumulated emotion is coming. Okay, let's take a short break here, and then we'll kind of crank through this kind of last section. I guess we'll probably go another 15 minutes just for everybody to know. I'll answer some questions and we'll come back and finish up. All right. All right. So how to address sloppy moves you made in the past, oversizing that actually worked out, and you feel like this may return in the future under heat. Yeah, you got to call it out, right? I mean, you have to remind yourself of the flaws that were really associated with that. I don't think that you're going to be able to stop it entirely. You can still, you may have the impulse, but if you catch the impulse and you know that that's a possibility, right, and you have the correction in place, then you'll be able to kind of clean it up. So you can be a bit kind of ahead of it, and then also react to it as it occurs. With trading, there are times where I feel like I have a child's mind in an adult body. Been there. Outside of trading, this doesn't occur that often. In trading, it seems to creep in insidiously. Any comments or suggestions on how to address it? Look, I mean, trading can oftentimes just draw out elements of ourselves that, the rest of life does not. So, what does that mean? It means that there may be something from your personal past that you need to resolve, and that trading can help you to be that access point to it. So, you could try to describe what that child's mind is really like, the age, and start to maybe look at some memories, things that kind of went on around that. We're kind of getting a bit more personal here, but you can certainly kind of do that digging. But there's clearly something that you want to be resolving in your personal past that is kind of breaking through in trading. Is confidence a type of emotion? Yes. Confidence is the emotion that reflects the perception of your skill. So overconfidence would be the perception being excessive. Underconfidence would be that perception being excessively negative. So confidence is not an accurate reflection of your actual skills or competencies. If it was, then, I mean, my God, so many of the issues that traders experience would just disappear instantly, right? But so many of the problems occur because it is hard to know what your exact skills are. The market provides so much false feedback that it's difficult to know what that is. So yeah, when we start to look at confidence being an emotion, then we can start to look at what the flaws are that produce it to make it, to be, to cause overconfidence or a lack of confidence. All right. Sometimes forgetting the strategic reminder itself. Why is that? Due to accumulated issues? It's possible. I mean, it's hard to know, right? But yeah, if you're forgetting something, it could just be because you're not training it enough, or it could be because your reminder is actually not clean enough either. Or yes, the accumulated emotion can just kind of override your kind of higher brain function, and you have no chance really at that point. Okay. Any other questions? Looks like everybody's still here. So if we're good to keep going and finish off strong, we will. All right. So somebody in the chat I saw mentioned, am I going to talk about Inchworm? And so here we are. Okay. So how to keep making progress, right? And ensure the system continues to work for you. Okay. Right. This is so important because so many people, right, not just traders, have faulty views of the learning process, right? And so not only is this a major contributor to some of the emotional problems that are affecting your execution, right, but it also can affect your process outside of trading, right, and the work that you put in, right? But it, of course, can affect your confidence and motivation. It can affect how hard you work and ultimately what you work on. So let's take a look at this, okay? So this is a concept that I came up with when I was first getting into poker. And when I first got into poker, I was sort of thrust into the spotlight of the online poker world. I played poker as a kid, growing up, and would still play with buddies and friends and whatnot. But the difference between that is massive, right? It's like watching CNBC one day and then deciding to become a trader. I mean, it's massive gap. And so I knew this was a group of people that I could not just BS. Right? I mean, their job was actually to call out people who are bluffing. So I decided instead to train them on my system, very much like what I'm doing with you all. And this was the first time that I was sort of forced to systematize my system. And in that process, out pops this concept. And the concept is called inchworm. If those of you have not seen this thing before, here is how it moves. And I want you to just pay attention to what it looks like. What does it look like to you? Well, to me, it looks like a bell curve. Okay. See it now? Yeah, it's a moving bell curve. Okay. So now what does this teach us? Well, let's look at what a bell curve would mean for you all. Okay. A bell curve is a statistical distribution of data. Okay. And the data in this case, we're going to say is your decision-making process or your execution. And if we get a large enough sample, you are going to see it be distributed in a way like this, where you've got, a high frequency of B game, a slightly lower frequency of A game, and a slightly lower frequency of C game. Now, of course, your data set could be skewed right to the right if, you've been killing it, doing really well in a high state, but you still have a C game, even when that occurs. It just may not be showing up that often. And then conversely, right, you got a high frequency of B and C game and not as much A game, right, when you're kind of struggling. And but the bottom line is, right, you have a range of your ability. Okay. And one of the things that, many traders and people get kind of stuck in is, well, how do we move ourselves forward? What does progress actually look like? And I think one of the biggest mistakes traders make, is thinking too one-dimensionally about your skill set, right? As if it's all one thing, right? And it's like this whole thing is moving forward. But when we start to break it apart and look at these very distinct levels of your performance, right? A game, B game, C game, right? It gives you the idea that the first thing that you've got to do is move your weaknesses forward. You got to move your C game forward, right? Because if you don't, right? Why is this not pausing? There we go. Because if you don't, right, how is this inchworm going to step forward, right? He needs that, mother of God, right? In order to take that step forward, right, that back end has to get anchored, and it gets anchored from the front end, okay? And so that is, in my mind, kind of the key here. Come on. Okay. Next movement here is going to be the movement forward, because that back end has moved forward. So progress, as it exists, occurs at all levels of your range. You can improve your A game, you can improve your B game, you can improve your C game. So what happens with a lot of my clients, with a lot of people that I see, right? They feel like they're taking steps backwards. They feel like under different circumstances that they're not as good as they were yesterday. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that you failed? No, it means that maybe you just sort of fell back, right? And does that negate the progress from the day before? No. Can you find points of strength to actually move yourself forward? There's a lot of opportunity to improve at any point in your range. So if you're having a bad day, right, as I frequently say, is that's your opportunity to start to suck less, right? Sucking less is the key to success. The more that you can suck less in these key moments, right, where you have the opportunity to fail just as much as you have before, but you can do something slightly different, right? Delay the onset of tilt by 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? I would define that as progress, even if it still runs you over and you make the same mistakes that you would before. That is not failure. That is progress. Is that the ultimate progress that you want? Of course not. Okay. But the important thing is that you recognize that as progress so that you keep working, knowing that you're moving in the right direction, knowing that you're still not there yet, but that you're taking steps closer to that. Okay. So here are some key kind of takeaways from this concept. Number one is that weaknesses hold you back. Weaknesses are the thing, right? The back end of your C game, the back end of that inchworm is, I think, what people typically are focused on when they're talking about self-sabotage, right? They get themselves kind of undercut and are unable to continue to progress, right? And emotional issues are the thing that is really like kind of like locking that back end in place where it starts to feel like the only way you're going to make progress is like inchworm commando style, where you're just dragging yourself flat across the ground. And so those emotional issues are really the big cause of something that I call a wide range, right? Where the gap between your very best and your very worst gets very wide. When that occurs, there's a whole host of issues that occur, right? You're going to burn out more frequently. It's going to be a lot harder for you to be your best, right? It's going to take a lot more energy to be there. You're going to have a lot more emotional volatility, emotional ups and downs. It's going to be harder for you to be consistent as a result of that. Okay. So you really need to focus, if that's the case, on that back end. Focus on the emotional issues that are kind of locking up that back end. I said this before, right? Sucking less is the key to success. Number two is that you can't actually take steps backwards, right? Steps backwards, like the ones that you feel like are occurring, are only occurring within your range. You can't take a step backwards from the back, right? You might slip up, right? For sure. That happens all the time. But once you slip up, see how quickly you can recover. See how quickly you can suck less and start moving yourself back towards making progress. Comparing apples to apples. So this one's important, right? Because like, let's say you've had 4 or 5 days where you've been doing really well, made a bunch of money, and then you have a bad day. So it's easy to compare the bad day to the good day, and you're going to feel bad for that. But what if you compare the bad day to the previous bad day? Because you had one before, let's say it was a week ago. Was the bad day any better? So apples to apples, bad day to bad day, did you make progress? I would argue that many of you are going to be able to say yes right now, right? Even if that means just greater awareness of what's happening, right? You see things, but you can't stop it yet. Fine. Beginning stages of progress is that, okay? But apples to apples, is there progress? If the answer is yes, cool. Keep working it. If the answer is no, what's my rule? Take 2 weeks, right? Give yourself 2 weeks to try. And if it's not working, then there's something else to play here. And the same thing is true for your best, right? I would argue that sometimes when you've had 4 or 5 days, 7 days of success and then had a big bad day, probably was something off on those good days. And if you're looking more practically about what your actual A game is, it may not be present there. So best to best, can you actually become better at in those phases where you're winning a good chunk? Your execution become that much more precise, which is then going to make the drop off less likely to occur. And then lastly, you can't always be at your best. So many of you expect or want to be perfect, to be at your best at all times. And Inchworm is basically saying that is impossible, that you will always have a C game. Every trader on the planet, the best in the world, right? Every person on this planet, myself included, has a C game, has weaknesses. The question is, are you aware of what they are? Because if you're not, they're going to bite you in the ass. All right. So let's just talk a little bit here about more granular details about this is kind of A game, B game, C game concept. Okay. We can start to classify mistakes as being different based on your mental state or your emotional state at the time that they were made. And if we classify them in this way, and for those of you who really struggle in handling mistakes, I think you can make some significant improvements here. Okay, C game, those are called obvious mistakes because you have so much technical knowledge, right? There's nothing technical wrong. Okay, the problem was that there was something mental or emotional that caused your emotions or your mental state to be either too high or too low, and that is the cause. You cannot make an obvious mistake without having enough technical knowledge to know that it is a mistake very quickly. Okay, so you can focus your effort purely on the mental and emotional side of it. Now, these B game marginal mistakes are kind of this sort of intersection, this blending of something tactical, something mental. So do both. Lastly, in your A game, if you're in your A game and you do something that you suspect is wrong, you make what we'd call a mistake, or what you would call a mistake, then there was nothing mental that was at play here. Your mental and emotional state was optimal for you at that time, not optimal in a pure sense, but optimal for you at that time. And so this was an unavoidable mistake, unavoidable weakness, something in your tactical decision-making, right, that had to occur. And this would be equivalent to an infant learning to walk. or a toddler learning to walk. I don't think infants learn to walk, but a toddler learning to walk. And so just treat it as such. But so often, right, it's easy to be very, very critical, especially those with high expectations of perfection, very, very critical of those learning mistakes when they're just unavoidable weaknesses. All right, so let's just take a couple minutes here. We're not going to spend too much time. I want you just to think about your B game, okay? So if you can turn to page 16 in your workbook, there's space for you to kind of fill this out. This is not a test. You're not being graded on this. I just want you to take a few minutes and think about it. Write down what your B game is. And I'm calling this out because for many traders, it's easy to describe, their C game, what it's like at their worst, or when they're at their best. But the B game often gets missed. And so take a few minutes. We're going to maybe put like 90 seconds on the clock here. And then if you can just kind of post some elements of what you come up with in the chat, just so we can have a little bit of a discussion here. Yeah, this is great. So I'm happy to see, you got some awareness here. I would say that, if we're going to connect, I'll do it here. So I don't want to drive you guys crazy, right? But there's a tool that I use called an A to C game analysis. I'm going to firmly call this a bonus, okay, for those of you that want to take this on. But the A to C game analysis really becomes a tool to help you evaluate your performance day to day. So it does link to the mapping, okay, where, C game is going to be like kind of the levels like 5 through 10 of the map. B game is going to be levels, let's say 3 to 5 or 3 to 6. Right. And a lot of you are pulling out things that are I think, very good examples of B game. And my guess is that they ought to kind of fit into some of your mapping already. Okay. Now, this is different. Okay. So the map is designed to help you to correct your problem in real time. This is trying to help you to grade your performance so that you can be evaluating yourself in a non-P&L, non-results driven way. Okay. So many of you get sucked into being results oriented. And why does that happen? Well, one reason is because you don't have an alternative, right? You need feedback. We all need feedback to know how we're doing. The problem is in trading, the feedback is garbage in the short term, right? It's just false and inaccurate. I mean, if I was a golfer hitting perfect drives down the middle of the fairway, having it hit a sprinkler head and going out of bounds 10 times in a row, I might think I was a bad golfer, right? I would wonder what the hell was going on. But that kind of false feedback can drive y'all nuts. And I've seen it in poker. I think poker is probably the best equivalent to trading in that regard. And so this has become a tool that has been very, very helpful to help you to kind of step away from that. So the mapping is more for the correcting your emotions. This is more around grading your performance. So yes, as you look at your A game, your B game, and your C game, right, you can pull things out from your mapping, right? We talked in the first webinar about what you're like at your best. Pull that out and throw it into your A game, right? And we're going to try to distinguish it between mental game and tactical. But, for some people, it kind of gets all blurry. But you can see, some of the differences in what's described here, okay? At the end of the day, it's all about grading your performance, because if you're grading your performance, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to be more emotionally stable and have more accurate perceptions of your progress, right? So you do have this as a worksheet. We are going to make it as something you can submit, and then I'll review in the next workshop, next webinar. But it's not something that is required. For some of you that are still struggling with the mapping, don't do this unless you feel like you're just super excited by it. I do not want this to be overwhelming. This is a pure bonus for those of you who are ready to, okay? All right, so let's just do a quick little recap here, and then I'll get to any final questions. All right, so mapping your pattern, review webinar 1 and 2, all right? And if you have specific questions, send them to me. But you really should be trying to finalize your map if you haven't done so already. Step 2, right? Getting to the root of your problem, right? So controlling your emotion is different than resolving it. Burn that in your brain, right? We want to be looking for really the roots of these issues. And I think some of you we could define as kind of focusing too much on the technical side was almost a way of kind of managing or controlling your emotions. Right? To eliminate a recurring problem, you need to identify the root cause, which means you got to focus more on the psychological side of the coin here, right? So revise your mental hand history or complete new ones entirely. Okay. Solving your problem, right? Right. You need to be preparing your mind for battle, right? And that means reviewing those maps and real-time strategies, right? It needs to be cold. I mean, if I were to do a test on any one of you, ones that I reviewed today, could you repeat everything that's on there? My bet is no. I mean, portions of it you'd get, inaccurately. It needs to be at 100%, right? When it's at 100%, then it becomes so much easier for you to recognize in real time what's going on and then inject those corrections so that you can actually, do something different and maybe suck a little less, right? Right. So patterns have a momentum that will continue until, their inevitable bad conclusions. Step number one, right. Devise or correct your problem. If you haven't done that already, review your strategy and apply it again and again. Right. What does progress look like? Here's our inchworm concept. Reliable signs of progress is what we're looking for. Right. And inchworm helps you to create that. Step number one, suck less. Right. That should actually be your goal every single day. You can have two goals every day. Number one is to suck less. Number two is to see how good you can perform. Right. Sucking less becomes the foundation for you to thrive. Step number two, review your progress daily. So at the end of the day, right, you can take a step back and just ask yourself the question, what did I do better today? Right. And if the idea of being better was, for 2 minutes, I was able to inject logic and fight and maybe exit a position that I might normally have held for another 5 or 10 minutes, right? That's progress, even if it was, still as bad as it may be, as bad as something you wouldn't describe as being what you want ideally, right? We want these problems gone, but in the short term, sometimes it's just about making some small suck less kinds of progress, right? And then the option to complete an A to C game analysis is there. All right, so you can post in the chat. What was your biggest takeaway from today? Was it some of the improvements to your map, improvements to your mental hand history, the X factors causing accumulated emotion, or was it inchworm and the A to C game analysis? Throw your answers in the chat or anything else that kind of resonated today, and I will get to some questions. And I think while I kind of start to review the questions, I think Richard will kind of pull up the website so you can kind of know what your assignments are for next week. I guess I will say generally, right? Like, so at this point, we're not adding in a lot new, right? It really is about consolidation, and I think the bulk of your focus really needs to be finalizing that map and having a good mental hand history, so you can kind of work through and get to the root of your issues and use that to devise your corrections. That's kind of the bulk of where we're at. There's not a lot being new added here. It's all about the consolidation of the strategy that can be really, really tight.
Yep. And Jared, can you see my screen?
I can, yeah. So we're good.
Yeah. So instead of going to the website, we'll just kind of talk through the task booklet. And like Jared said, a lot of it is revising the work you've already done. We've covered a lot of the first few steps of the system to give you that time to troubleshoot, to keep revising and getting updated feedback from Jared if he's able to. So task one for this week is to finalize your maps, go back through, add strategic reminders. That's something we focused on today. Task number two is revise a mental hand history, or if you think you're solid on the ones you've done, you can go ahead and complete some additional ones depending on where you see your problems still lying. Task three, as Jared said, this is kind of bonus, this is optional, but if you're ready to take that next step, you can go over to this form right here, and we've included a Word document as well on the course website, and you can go ahead and fill in your C game, B game, A game for both the mental side of things as well as your tactical trading abilities there as well. So that's pretty much it. And we've got some steps here. Go ahead and revise it and upload to the course by May 18th. That's when this homework is due. And that would be at 5 p.m. Eastern time. But once again, if you don't have time to complete it before then, get it into us whenever you can. The important thing is to basically get the most out of the series and, advance your abilities to the best of your ability. You want to go ahead and complete this work because that's how you're really going to see that progress. So follow these steps, upload it to the course, and also tweet it out on Twitter using this QR code right here. That's pretty much it from my side of things. Jared, anything to add about this process? Any advice or anything at all?
Yeah, no, I think just looking at some of the comments, right, and some of the takeaways being around kind of the iterations around the mental hand history. And yeah, I think the interaction was great today. I'm really thankful for everybody that was willing to kind of come on and work through it. And hopefully everybody else can see that, there is a lot of opportunity to be digging deeper in the right ways, to really be developing that robust strategy that's going to kind of get you on the other side of these issues. So I strongly encourage you to really kind of work harder with the mental hand history. Stay in the trenches, right? Don't allow the difficulty of it to throw you off. Do the best that you can. And then the next time, right, we're going to keep iterating on this, right? So we've got all the tools in place. It's now just a question of like refining them so that they can work for you, because we've only got 2 more sessions. And by the end of those 2 sessions in a month from now, I want you to be able to feel confident that you're going to be able to go on and continue to make progress and really become the kind of. So do that work. And let me get to a few questions here. I've actually got to go in a couple minutes, so I won't be able to get to all of them. But I will say quickly, Tom, that the tournament did go very well. I was able to qualify. It was a qualifier for a tournament that I'll have in 3 weeks. But I do have another tournament on Monday, which is the U.S. Open qualifier, which is the one that basically kind of thrust me into this whole profession 25 years ago. So we'll see how it goes. Mother's Day on Monday, or Mother's Day on Sunday, so I may not have as much time to practice this weekend as I want, but it is what it is. It's the life of an amateur. So all right, Vanessa, when I have low energy and do not feel like I'm doing my routines, planning trades, I have trouble distinguishing between fear of failure, lack of discipline, or that I need a break because I'm close to burnout. Can you give me some tips to distinguish them? Yeah, that is difficult. I understand. What I would say is that when you know, right, that it's one or the other, which may only happen on occasion, write those details down that really distinguish what a lack of discipline feels like in comparison to a fear of failure, right? I'm certain that burnout does occur, but it's probably burnout being caused because there's so much emotional volatility that's back there. So, even the burnout, I wouldn't necessarily say is entirely benign here. Like I would look more about the fear of failure and the lack of discipline as the things you want to be focused on. All right. Would I briefly describe again how to connect steps 4 and 5 of the mental industry to injecting logic and strategic reminder? So steps 4 and 5 basically can just turn right into your injecting logic statements. I mean, they may be too long for you to inject in the moment, so you may need to simplify them down to something that's a bit more bite-sized. But the strategic reminder is really just the technical side of it. So some of the examples that I described, and some of you are making your mental history more technically oriented. And if that's the case, then just pull that stuff out and add it to your strategic reminder, and then work through just the psychological side of things. I feel like my FOMO, tilt, and confidence are all related. FOMO can spark a tilt after getting angry with myself that I knew I should be patient and wait for another trade. Overconfidence and lack of proper prep can spark tilt too. After entering a poor trade, I can get frustrated and trying to recoup losses from my mistakes. I'm wondering what I should focus on first. So if you want to go straight for the jugular and go as deep as you want, go to the confidence. If you want to kind of battle on the surface, focus on the FOMO and tilt. From Jeff, I find it much harder to push my A game to my A plus versus taking C to B. I would expect this in a strive for excellence, but is there a point where striving to become more of a high performer becomes detrimental to long-term success? No, I would say that it's more in the means by which you're striving for that, right? So, A plus is not something you can force. My sense is that you're trying to force it. It's easy to force C game into B game because there you understand very clearly what needs to happen. It's very much like you're chopping down that tree and you're just sort of forcing your way to that. You can't do that with A plus game, right? With the getting in the zone. It's more of a cocktail, more of a mixture that you're trying to kind of put together the right factors together to just sort of let it happen, because you can't control that state. There's just too much that's intangible for you to be able to have full control of. Do I offer one-on-one training? Yes, I do. You can go to my website for more information there. Confused on B game, more examples or questions we can ask ourselves to ID B game attributes. Yeah, so like if you can map or identify C and A game really well, then try to figure out, all right, well, what's slightly better than C game and what's slightly worse than A game. All right. Tanya said she misunderstood the strategic reminder and makes sense now. Good stuff. We're done. We did it. Only 25 minutes over this time, so I would consider that to be a massive success. I feel like I've sucked less today. So, but no, listen, there's a lot of great material that you guys are proposing. I'm excited to see what comes around next time around. I will have more kind of concepts that we'll add in here, but more of the concepts are going to be to help to make things just work together better. But we do all that better entirely if you continue to send in your homework and give me some more things that will help you, because again, that's what it's really all about. So I wish you all well. Have a great few weeks, and I'll see you on the 21st.
21st, two Saturdays from now. And thanks everybody, especially the volunteers. We really appreciate you guys coming on. That was excellent. And everybody wish Jared luck for this upcoming Monday. Yep. A lot of thank yous in the chat. So thank you guys, everybody, and have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.